Hey guys, this is Laura with Logarithmic Astrology, and I'm here to give you the astrological update from February 10th through the 16th, 2020. So, there's really not much going on this week, apart from two pretty big things that are happening on February 16th, which is Sunday. The first is that Mars is moving into the sign of Capricorn. And Mars is our actions. It's how it's our pace in the world. It's how we take action. It's our energy levels. And Mars in Capricorn is exalted, meaning that Mars functions really well in Capricorn. It's able to perform its duty as a planet really well because although Mars is a really fiery planet and usually wants to do things quickly, fast, compulsively, impulsively, maybe even without thinking sometimes, Capricorn is a very serious sign that likes a lot of forethought and planning and conserving. And so it kind of like reins in Mars's energy as a planet and uses it more productively. And usually, so Mars is one of two malefics in astrology, meaning it's a planet that often gives us strife in our charts and in our lives. But there is a theory that when a malefic planet enters a sign where it either is in rulership or it's exalted, that that planet's energies are actually more productive and less destructive. And that energy is more constructive in general. So this happens around 4:15 a.m. Mountain Time on Sunday the 16th. And once again, Mars and Capricorn could be more productive in terms of the way you take action could be more methodical, could be more thought out, could be more organized, serious, empowered, productive, systematic, authoritative, ambitious. These are kind of like the nature of how you take action. Once again, Mars can also represent conflict or where conflict comes into our lives. Or it could indicate where we want more independence or where we want to sever something away, going our own way. It could indicate strife, once again, conflict. Mars and Capricorn could even represent someone else. Oftentimes, planets in our charts don't always belong to us. It's this whole idea that certain energies that we are unable to acknowledge within us oftentimes get projected outwardly into the world. And so if we don't experience a planet's energy internally, then it will make itself known externally through another person or a situation. So, Mars in Capricorn could be an authoritative figure, and, whether that's serving you or not really depends on if it's making a trine aspect to one of your personal planets, or if it's making a harsh aspect like an opposition. It could be bringing conflict or strife or into your life where there normally isn't any. I mean, once again, wherever Mars is traveling, it gives you a sense of energy into that part of your life. So if Mars is going through your 7th house of partnerships and relationships and other people, that could be totally energizing that part of your chart. If you're single, maybe you suddenly have a lot more energy to go out and date or go on dates. It could also mean conflict. So it could be that suddenly conflict arises with other people in general or with a partner. So there's just so much that this could indicate. Generally, though, Mars exalted in Capricorn is more positive. So, but I would be curious to know how it turns out for you. And actually, at the end of this little video, I'm going to add on a little video explaining the houses very briefly, and I'll have a PDF that you can download on my website, basically, and I'll get into that later. So that is February 16th, Sunday. And actually, let me just see how long we have Mars in Capricorn for. This is my ephemeris. In case you don't know what this is, it tells you where all the planets are in the sky at all times. It looks like this. I know it looks kind of overwhelming. Okay, so Mars is in Capricorn until pretty much the end of March. So usually Mars stays in a sign for about 6 weeks. So we have about 6 weeks to explore this theme. The other big thing that we have happening on this day, February 16th, Sunday, is Mercury going retrograde in Pisces, the sign that Mercury does not function very well in. Mercury is in detriment in Pisces because Mercury has a goal to dissect things, to make things smaller, to clarify, to analyze, to get really into the details. And Pisces is a sign ruled by Jupiter, which wants to expand and make things bigger and look at the big picture and just doesn't want to be concerned with the details. So Mercury really struggles in Pisces. That being said, a planet that's in detriment does have to make itself of use in a creative way. And oftentimes, although people with Mercury in Pisces in their birth charts may struggle or may have this sense of struggling to communicate or to be heard or to form like coherent thoughts. I mean, some amazing writers have Mercury and Pisces, so there's this more creative ebb and flow to your words. Poetry is such a Mercury and Pisces thing, so it can become a strength if you're willing to work with the energy. But in general, Mercury is debilitated in Pisces, and so wherever this is happening for you in your chart, depending on which house it's happening for you in, those topics will be under review and reflection, and generally there'll probably be a sense of rethinking that part of your life in some way. Mercury retrogrades are generally bad for detailed work, kind of bad for traveling, so avoid it if you can. Be flexible, expect delays. There will be delays, especially with the Mercury retrograde in a sign of its detriment. So this is kind of like Mercury drunk. I think I mentioned that before. This could be a good time to go to therapy, to hone more inwards. Don't expect to be productive. Focus on creativity instead, and maybe even compassion for yourself and others. I mean, Pisces is a sign of compassion and soulfulness and emotion, like really Mercury being the planet of how we communicate and our minds and how we think. It could be a time to really get in connection with that heartfelt sense of what you want to say to people, that heartfelt and compassionate your feelings, like maybe even giving them voice, speaking them, writing them, really getting in touch with those emotions. Pisces being a water sign is very much so about emotions. So definitely a good time to connect with others in a very creative and fluid way. Write poems, but not papers. Don't make big life decisions, and don't sign contracts during this time. Definitely not. Once again, Mercury in Pisces retrograde, and any Mercury in retrograde in general, is about reconsidering, rethinking. And Pisces, once again, is a very idealistic sign as well. So it could be a time where you're reconsidering or rethinking your dreams, your aspirations, your idealizations. Once again, more specifically in the house that you have Pisces on the cusp of. So for example, if this is happening in your career house, the 10th house, then you might be rethinking your life's direction, where you want to go, what you want to aspire towards. If this is happening in your 12th house, the house of like isolation, hidden enemies, being alone, struggling with dark night of the soul, the unconscious realms. Honestly, you might just want to spend a lot of time alone and just really be with yourself and get to the heart of your emotions. I would definitely say Pisces in general can have a habit of there's this sense of having rose-colored glasses on, and especially with Mercury in Pisces retrograde, I would definitely be suspicious if you meet the one, like in terms of relationships. Just, enjoy the moment, but don't make any like proposals necessarily. This also goes along with, we have at this time Venus in Aries, Venus being the sign of relationships and love and romance and how we unite and how we attract people to us and how we all get along. And I think I mentioned this last week, but Venus is also in detriment in Aries, and they have separate goals. Aries wants to separate and do things individually, and Venus wants to unite and create harmonious relationships. And probably not the best time to delve in relationships, or like, I don't want to say, don't go on dates with people if you're trying to date or looking around, but don't make any big decisions. Definitely just kind of enjoy the moment, but don't commit. Don't sign contracts. Don't get married. Yeah. So this retrograde period starts on the 16th and goes through March 10th. And so retrograde means that a planet is traveling backwards in the sky. So Mercury will reach about 12 degrees of Pisces before it travels backwards through those same degrees of Pisces. Now there's 30 degrees in every sign. So when Mercury's going to be traveling backwards until it hits 28 degrees of Aquarius. And that's when Mercury will station direct, meaning it'll start to move forward again on March 10th. Now, when Mercury moves forward again, it's going to be tracking through those same degrees that it just retrograded through. And it'll reach that point where it first went retrograde at 12 degrees of Pisces on March 30th. So if you, for example, applied for a job before the Mercury retrograde, let's say you applied for a job on the 15th. Normally during Mercury retrogrades, you don't really necessarily hear back from the job you applied for. There can be miscommunication, there's delays. Just always think of Mercury retrograde with delays. But you should hear back from that place that you submitted an application for by the time that Mercury reaches or is done traveling through its shadow period, meaning by March 30th, Mercury will be back at the same degree of Pisces that it first went retrograde in. And usually at that point, there is suddenly messages coming through. Suddenly you're getting feedback. Suddenly you have that job interview. It's like all the things that were kind of like, backed up and frustrated and clogged even, just come rushing forth to be seen and for things to kind of speed back up to its normal pace. So just be flexible, don't expect too much, and really pay attention to March 30th, as that is not only when Mars will leave Capricorn, that's when Mercury will be out of its shadow period. And so there might be also around that time, all the things that you were digesting and rethinking and reflecting upon. There will probably be some clarity, some realization, maybe some kind of like redirection or commitment to how it is that you want to reform that thing that you were unpacking, right? So anyway, that might have been very confusing. I hope not. But okay, I wanted to say a note about Venus and Aries really quickly. So it's never a good idea to take action on things that the planets represent when they are in a sign of their detriment or fall, meaning that they're in a sign that they can't function well in. So Venus, once again, represents anything having to do with beauty and value, relationships, finances, things that are of value and things that are that help us even feel good about ourselves. Like makeup is a very Venusian thing. So our tattoos and piercings and making ourselves beautiful, are adorning ourselves with jewels. Any sort of artwork or dance or self-expression, anything creative could be Venusian. So, when Venus is in Aries, I would say it's definitely not a good time to get tattoos or piercings. There could be like lasting scars. Something could go wrong. There could be an infection. Like these are the types of things that could go wrong. I would say avoid doing any sort of redecorating in your house or like getting any like new carpet done. Things will just, usually there's a result that creates conflict or strife, or it's just not done the way you wanted it to be. Yeah. And also maybe avoid buying artwork at this time, like if it's like super expensive, basically, if it's like you're supporting your friend's art and it costs like $20-$30, go for it. But anything super expensive. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting week, or at least an interesting day on Sunday, because although, we have Mars going into Capricorn, which is exalted, so we have all this really organized, productive, efficient energy to work with, our mind, represented by Mercury, is kind of debilitated in Pisces, and it's retrograde, so it's, there's going to have to be a balance between having these kind of lofty, ideal, dreamy ideas and maybe wanting to take action on them. So yeah, I would say the Mars in Capricorn can definitely be very helpful in things you already have going on and projects you already have going on, and like getting organized, whatever area of life it's happening in for you. And Mercury in Pisces retrograde is more of a time for reflection, looking within, and exploring creativity, dreams, maybe even dream work, and really getting in touch with your emotions and learning how to communicate those with others and connecting with others over them. So yeah, that is February 10th through 16th. And shortly I will be talking about the houses. And once again, you can go to my website, lauragodenick.com. There should be like a tab for freebies, but I'll have a link in the show notes. So if you want a download of the houses, you can find it there, and you can continue listening to the video for kind of a more in-depth description. Okay, cool. Okay, so this is my PDF of the houses, and as you can see, this is the shape of a birth chart. And the houses are indicated by the little numbers in the center, going 1 through 12. And I'm just going to read this out loud, even though I know you can read it. Once again, this will be available on my website, and I'll have a link for it in the comments on the YouTube page. But the first house is the house of you. It is totally dedicated to you, to the concept of self, identity, to your body, and how others see you, or how you present yourself to the world. So when we have planets that are traveling through the first house, oftentimes things kind of come up directly to us, for us, rather than with other people or with friends. For example, this past summer, I had Venus transiting over my first house in Gemini, and like right as Venus was crossing over my ascendant, which is the marker of the first house, I was on a flight to Portland, and I got an offer to take a later flight in exchange for $500. So remember, Venus indicates money and finances, and so in that instance, Venus literally brought or reflected the fact that I was just offered $500. That's kind of a, it doesn't always come in the form of money. It could have just as easily been, me wanting to express myself in a different way and like, you know, like redo my hairstyle or get a tattoo or get some makeup or get some new clothes or, you know, even be more complimentary to people and more accommodating and peaceful. That's just one example. The second house is money, finances, your financial attitude, your personal belongings, and your values. Whenever a planet goes through this house, a transiting planet, it, you know, brings things up with regards to those topics. So if you have Saturn there, for example, or Saturn transiting through your second house, then you might feel really limited or restricted in terms of money. You might feel like you have to work really hard to obtain money or to make money. You might go into debt. I mean, that would probably be more of an 8th house thing, but still. With Jupiter going through that house, you might feel totally abundant and generous, and money might be easy for you. You might make money with no problem. Those are just a few examples. The third house is the house of siblings, neighborhood, K through 12 education, local travel, communication, and generally just like your everyday life. The little nuances that you do in your everyday life. There's a real sense of familiarity with the third house. And it kind of, you know, it totally depends. Like those are kind of seemingly random topics, and we don't really know which ones will be acted out, I guess. So this is one example. For example, let's use the case of Saturn again. If Saturn's going through your third house or transiting through your third house, you might not be experiencing challenges or difficulties, but a brother or a sister might, if you have siblings. They might be going through a really hard time and may feel really limited and restricted. I mean, you could also feel kind of limited and restricted in how you communicate or feel like you're blocked in some way. Let's see if I can think of another example. Similarly, if Venus or Jupiter are traveling through, then your siblings might be having a grand old time and doing really well and experiencing a lot of joy and fulfillment. Or if Mars is traveling through there, maybe you get in a fight with a sibling, or, you know, you get in a fight or a conflict of sorts at your school. If, you know, this is K through 12 education, maybe a car accident. So these are all different ways that the planets can manifest in that house, among like hundreds more probably. Fourth house is home and family, also the house of father, real estate, roots, land or property you own or inherit. This is the deepest part of the chart in terms of visibility. It is the most unseen part. It's a very private part of the chart. And you know, if you have a planet like Pluto, like I think I gave this example a couple videos ago, but like the Pluto-Saturn conjunction happened for my dad in his 4th house, and he had like a flooding. He had his pipes burst in his house, and he had to totally like take out his carpet and move all of his belongings out of the house and just do this whole, like have this whole like redoing of his house done. That was kind of bad grammar, but you know what I mean. And so in that instance, it wasn't necessarily my dad, like in terms of his identity or body, but it was his home. It was literally where he lived, or where he lives, that was happening. 5th house is the house of self-expression, creativity, fun, children, romance, and sports. This is a really lovely house. I mean, obviously, any house can be challenging. Once again, using Saturn as an example, Saturn's transiting through this house, you might feel really limited in how you're expressing yourself, or limited in your sense of self-expression, or like you can't have fun or enjoy the simple pleasures of life. With Jupiter, you might maybe like explore new artistic endeavors, or discover new ways of self-expression, like dancing or playing music. There's more of abundance quality to that house. Okay, sixth house. And this will be work, daily routine, health, service, the daily grind, attitude towards your work, and health. This is, a little bit more of the mundane houses, I would say. So a few different ways this can manifest. Oftentimes with like planets like Mars or Saturn transiting through this house, it's like just working really hard and working long hours and feeling like you can't get a break. Could also be health problems. With like Jupiter or Venus going through that house, it could be work opportunities coming your way, or the like. So I think that's my main example for that. Okay, the seventh house, clearly indicated by the number 7, is other people. And this would be singular, not like a group of friends, but just other people, but more specifically partner, marriage, business partner, clients, or romantic partner in general. And so oftentimes when we have like a planet going through this house, it's not necessarily things aren't happening to us, they're happening to our partner or to other people in our lives or to a best friend or to a client we have or to a business partner. It's not happening to us. An example of this is for, if we have maybe Mars going through the 7th house, then maybe your partner experiences some conflict at work or gets fired or, Mars is the planet of the god of war, and so there's often a kind of severing away quality, cutting away, wanting independence, wanting to go away from the group and pioneer onwards alone. And so Mars often has that severing quality, even if we experience it as negative or our partners do. So once again, with the Mars example, getting fired from a job, your partner getting fired, or even just having conflict in your relationships in general. Let's see, other planets. Oh, and I forgot to mention, like the sun going through these houses generally means that these topics just kind of are a theme or come up in some way for the month. And this is definitely like very simplified. There are a lot of other factors. This is very general. When planets hit other planets in your chart, they trigger things and topics that those planets specifically are affiliated with, depending on what house they rule in your chart. And that's a little more complicated, and I'm not going to get there tonight. But in general, if the sun is going through the 7th house, then just a theme of partnership will be present for you in your life during that month. Okay, the 8th house has to do with sex, debt, death, other people's money, shared resources, the kind of the psychic interchanges that we have with others, and also the occult. So a lot of 8th house stuff is kind of shadowy material that people don't really want to talk about. People oftentimes who have personal planets in the 8th house, I find that they like work in banking. So literally they're like involved with other people's money, or maybe they're a therapist. They're literally dealing with other people's shit, to be frank. Let's see, what examples do I have with this? Oh, perfect example. I had this going on actually, or I still have this going on. This is where the Pluto-Saturn saga was happening for me. And with Saturn going through, and Pluto, Pluto's been going through that house for me for like the past 10 years, so it's not as big of a deal, but with Saturn added to it, I learned a lot about credit cards and debt and other people's money. Like I learned how to like I got my first credit card during this time period, and I like got experience with debt in general. Like, not like I don't have a ton of debt, but I'm just saying, like, got used to the experience of like paying off credit card debt, and also working through things like health insurance and all sorts of really not fun stuff. So that's one example of the eighth house. I think I forgot to mention, this is also the house of inheritances. I don't know if it's on there, but basically, money or benefits that come through other people are also associated with this house. So it can also like trigger like a death in the family results in an inheritance that you suddenly receive or something like that. Of course, it's different for everyone. The ninth house is the house of long journeys, philosophy, religion, spirituality, beliefs, higher education. So like grad school, PhD, and also publication if you're like writing a book or something. Obvious manifestation of a planet traveling through this house could be going on a long journey. For example, if Jupiter is going through the ninth house, along with the sun, for example, you might be going on a vacation across seas, or maybe on a longer extended journey, or maybe you're thinking about going back to school. All sorts of things. Let's see. 10th house is career, reputation, authority figures, what you aspire to be, and your role in the community. So, I haven't done Mercury yet, so this is kind of perfect. I have at least Mercury Retrograde and Pisces going through my 10th house, and so a lot of, and by the way, the Mercury Retrograde happened about a year ago around the same time. So clearly for me, there's been lots of thoughts about life direction and career, and even though I'm committed to astrology, like I've thought a lot about, do I want to combine this with psychotherapy or with another modality? And so there's a lot of contemplation there for me. And so with Mercury, for example, going through the 10th house, Mercury representing our minds and what we ponder, what we think about, it would be thinking about career, what direction I want to go towards. It could also represent an actual authority figure who is of a mercurial nature. Okay, the 11th house, friends and high places, groups, community, organizations, and hopes and wishes. This is a more positive house. Planets going through here can indicate an increase in friends, for example. If Jupiter is going through there, it could be an increase in friends. If Uranus is going through the 11th house, it could be that you're attracting radical friends, or you're more like wanting to be more associated with people who are a bit more radical and freedom seeking and freedom loving and wanting to do things a little bit differently. So yeah, that's a good example. The 12th house is the house of self-undoing, of places of isolation, dark night of the soul, the unconscious, and hidden enemies. Okay, so the 12th house. Planets going through this house can be a little bit more challenging. With a planet like Uranus, there could be like sudden insights as to things that were hidden from you, or sudden revelations, or things becoming kind of abruptly seen after being hidden for a while. Saturn going through this house along with Pluto could indicate some heavy depression, feeling a little just heavy. There's just this sense of heaviness. This house is a little bit more challenging even to explain or talk about. It's very elusive. when the sun is going through the 12th house or transiting the 12th house, generally it's a time of being alone, reflection, not being as outgoing or social, just like wanting to spend time with yourself, a good time to go on a retreat. The places of isolation include retreats, also places like hospitals, prisons, monasteries. It's the place that you go where you're struggling to make something clear and seen and visible. So it can be a little evasive. Yeah. So those are some examples of the 12th house. So I hope that gives you a somewhat good idea of what the houses mean, and when I talk about them in the videos, maybe you can have this handy, or you'll maybe know what I'm talking about a little bit more, and also I hope this gives you more of an idea of what the planets are activating when they go through each house. Well, not every planet, but at least some of them. And I'll try to do some future videos too on more just like how astrology works in general, because it is very complicated, and there's not like really one rule fits all. So, but once again, this will be linked in my website and also in the comments of the YouTube.